If you've been watching my videos, particularly the last one, you'll have seen my most recent project or idea is putting together a Byzantine army around the time of the Crusades. And this has been unlocked by two things. The first one, that there are a couple of nice, fun, accessible rule sets for kind of bigger size skirmish games. One being line Rampant, with their supplement of Viking in the Sun. And you can see their Harald Hardrada, all pimped up there in his lamellar armour and bits and pieces from the Byzantine Empire, but still basically a Viking, plus the rules in Saga, Age of Vikings, for the last Romans. But what has largely made this whole little project viable is the very large range of plastics for Byzantines of this era released by Fireforge Games, which stretches to many things, but alas, not the Varangian Guard. And one of the funkiest reasons to collect a Byzantine army must be the Varangian Guard. So basically, I'm sure everyone watching this video knows loads more about the Varangian Guard than I do, but in very high-level conceptual terms, you basically had the Byzantine Empire, the last Romans, the bits that were left over after the Western Empire kind of fell, transformed, whatever, making up modern Greece and the Balkans and modern Turkey, and loads of other bits that slowly got nibbled away till it collapsed in 1453. And what basically happened was they had loads of cash because they controlled the trade through these bits here to the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, and generally did very well and were pretty blingy. But they paid for a lot of mercenaries, and some of the mercenaries they paid for were Vikings were Scandinavians who were obviously huge lunks with giant axes. I'm sure obviously they were, lovely traders and cultural bastions and all that, but basically at the end of the day were very big men with very big axes, in my vision at least, and they would travel down the Russian rivers. Some of them were actually kind of Rus, whose ancestors were Vikings, and they travelled down to the big city of Constantinople, Miklagard, and were mercenaries, but they were to the emperor. But they weren't just basic mercenaries. If you listen to this fantastic set of podcasts, The History of Byzantium, you can listen to all 235 episodes for the whole history of Byzantium, but there's a very nice, accessible episode, a kind of Q&A, talking about the Varangian Guard, who they were and why they were so trusted. As I understand it, it was basically because they weren't just standard mercenaries who just fought for coin. They actually had their own barracks. They kind of swore an oath to the emperor, and whereas the emperor couldn't really trust all the conniving families around him in Byzantium not to just stab him, the Varangians were generally pretty loyal to the emperor, though apparently even Harald Hardrada, who we're all very familiar with if we're Brits, he boasted apparently of sort of blinding one of the emperors. I'm not sure they always were that great for the emperor, but they weren't like the Praetorian Guard in Rome who just kept on, choosing who the emperor was. They were generally pretty loyal. But one of the obstacles for me, because I do like to get things not necessarily historically right in a button counter kind of way, but I don't like things not to be a runner at all, totally implausible. So one of the issues with having the Varangian Guard is, they're not just standard Vikings. They've got seriously blinged up armour and weapons, which kind of looked like they were basically made by Byzantine craftsmen. So they're kind of a fusion, which makes them look very funky. But the thing is, I don't want to spend £3 to £5 or something for the bespoke Varangian Guard produced by the various manufacturers, which make them look very uniform, and they've got their own kind of lamellar armor, and that is a Viking shield, but they've got quite specific looking helmets, and I just thought, I don't want to fork out on all of that. So the question then occurred to me: what could I use my existing Vikings made by Foundry? Would they fit in terms of scale? Would they fit in terms of what they look like? And then I saw this fantastic video on YouTube by Invicta, who's obviously very prominent and famous on YouTube about the Varangian Guard and Harold Hardrada, and he gave me a bit of hope and an idea, because although, you know, the guys with lamellar armour and all the blinged up stuff were, you know, Varangians, the Varangians were divided into three, apparently. There were the Varangians of the city, and they're the ones who were the guards to the emperor, but you couldn't just walk into that. You had to be someone of particular repute and made your fame and fortune already. And so they're the ones with the super blinged up armour, highly paid in salary loot, it says there. But there were other groups. There were the mercenary Varangians, and they were included within the kind of the fighting forces, not just sort of the police of the capital. And they don't seem to have as blinged up armour as the Varangians of the city. And so they've still got, you know, their lamellar armour and greaves, whatever they're called, around their shins. But as you can see, you know, they're still looking a bit more like Vikings, albeit still wearing quite a lot of bespoke stuff that's clearly Byzantine. But then there are the sailing Varangians, which, as I understand it, are, you know, guys who just, you know, literally hopped off the boat from the Russian rivers, turned up and were put onto what Vikings do best, which is getting into, you know, the ships made by Floki and the Vikings, which are highly engineered for their time, but no one else seems to use, and just going around and kind of capturing pirates. And they basically look like normal Vikings to me. And Invicta did a lovely little piece showing how, you know, the Vikings would turn up looking like Vikings with their armour, perfectly recognisable, and exactly what my Foundry Vikings looked like. And slowly, as they made their fame and fortune, they would bling up with some nice new shields and some nice new axes and swords, culminating in, I can't remember what that thing is called, that weird Eastern-looking spear thing, if they actually made it to being the Emperor's personal guard. But the point of the story is, not all of them on day one would rock up with all the blingy Byzantine stuff. I.e., on day one, not all of them look like this, which is how the Viking in the Sun with this osprey image shows them to look. And so I had a look at my collection of Foundry Vikings and found that there were a very large number of Vikings with chainmail and, you know, fairly heavy armour and left over. And the reason I think there were so many left over is because in Saga, you know, they point out that only your Hearthguard are going to have this kind of high-end equipment, and everyone else is going to be a gump with a spear and a shirt and a shield, and that's pretty much it. And I thought for a long time they just sat in a box, and I thought, what can I do with them? But now the answer is obvious. The question is, can I turn them into Varangian Guard? And looking at the Byzantine spearmen from Fireforge Games, I'm no expert in this, but I'm going to use these later period shields for around the Crusader period on my spearmen, which leaves me with these earlier shields, and there's no reason to think that the Vikings wouldn't have been given surplus material on their sudden arrival in the Empire, because these guys aren't yet Palace Guard, they're just dudes fresh off the boat. So this is how my little Varangians turned out, taking the shields from the Fireforge Byzantine infantry plastic sprues, which weren't needed because they give you the option of kite shields for the later Byzantines and round shields for the slightly earlier Byzantines. And I know these are earlier and the Varangians aren't that early, but the thing is, it seemed to me that if you were a Viking, you know, you got your normal shield, big round shield, this would be a kind of a closer equivalent than a thin kite shield, which I'm not sure is designed for kind of shield wall approaches. You know, if these were the line breaker, go in and smash them up hirelings of the Byzantine Empire, I'm not sure that, with my enormous experience of ancient warfare, early medieval warfare, I'm not sure that
having a kite shield is as useful for a mass shield wall. But anyway, I'd welcome any comments. So in my little mind's eye, these kind of worked. I did experiment with giving them a variety of different shields. Some, you know, normal Vikings, some these, some the kite shields, but it really didn't look right. And also I thought to myself, if we're trying to show that these guys have rocked up in Miklagard, the big city of Constantinopolis, and done well for themselves a little bit, but not too much yet. You know, and been equipped by the Empire, surely we'd want to give them a bit more of a uniform look to distinguish them from normal Vikings. And I think what we'll do is if we ever get around to painting these, because they wouldn't be too hard to paint, you know, it's just loads of silver, bits and pieces of gold. I think what I would do is, I think I'll give them uniform shields, probably something like an unusual colour, like, you know, purple or a blue. I don't think I would do red, because I think red is for the rest of the Byzantine shields. Now, obviously, it would be brilliant to give them some kind of, you know, as per all of the bits of artwork online, give them some kind of pimped up Viking, Norse mythology type shield, you know, with one of Odin's ravens on it or something, and all manner of Near Eastern kind of patterns. The thing is, I'm never going to do that, and I'm not sure that every single Viking would have had that versus just been given a shield. And so that's what we will do one day. Now here's, to the extent we are going to have a little leader of the group, or a Harald Hardrada kind of figure. He must be screaming out for the role.
Look at his noble brow.
And who's he? Look how big he is.
Well, he reminds me at any rate of Rollo from the Vikings, who's just huge and insane.
Compared to a normal guy. This was a bit of a shame. He's a dead ringer for who he's supposed to be. From, I think, Hassle-Free Miniatures. But look how big he is. Look at his proportions compared to a normal dude. And I know people always say, oh, but people are different sizes and all that manner of open-mindedness. But I just think, you know, we're expecting Ragnar Lothbrok, hero of the age, to be at least of average height and average musculature, which this dude ain't. I don't think I'll get rid of him. I think I'll use him in Relic Blade or something as a barbarian, where all the miniatures seem a little bit on the smaller side. And so what I'll do to kind of pimp these up are, you know, give them colourful clothes, perhaps more colourful than you might a normal group of Dark Age warriors. And they've got a good amount of armour to show that they have rocked up in the city of the Emperor and done well for themselves. I think these are called the Hairy Vikings as well, Hairy Vikings pack. Well, these guys have obviously just come down from Rus and are still used to having long hair for the cold, horrid winters.
It's quite sweet. There's even one with a crucifix around his neck who's found Christ and abandoned the old gods. And in my mind's eye, he's going to be called Halfdan, who's the Viking who was, well, the Varangian Guard, or trader, but we're going to say Varangian Guard, who got a bit bored during some long, boring mass And in the Hagia Sophia in Byzantium, the big church at the time before it became a mosque, before Byzantium fell in Constantinople, this Viking Halfdan got a bit bored and carved his name into the side of something, and but maybe over time he just got less bored and found faith instead of finding the Greek Orthodox stuff just boring.
And as you can see, they fit in pretty well against the other Byzantine miniatures. These are the Byzantine infantrymen, Byzantine archers, and although the Vikings are obviously a tad bit beefier and a tad bit taller, the proportions are still the same, and it does reflect, you know, their USP and why they were hiding in the first place. They were, you know, huge Scandinavians compared to Eastern Mediterraneans, and they are a little bit bigger and a little bit stronger and a little bit taller, and very happy to die loyally for the Emperor, so what can go wrong?
And thank you for watching to the end. Rolo says goodbye as he wields his huge two-handed axe above his head in a crazed berserker-like fashion. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and at some point I'll issue the video clippings I've made of pulling together the Fireforge games, Klibanaforoi, the Cataphracts, and the Horse Archers, along with some thoughts around what I'm going to do about the officer class, and maybe even using these in some kind of fantasy setting. Have a great day.